welcome back to another episode of Real Faith Talk Show. I am your host, Monique Groves. For those of you who do not know me, I am not a pastor, I'm not a preacher or anything like that. I'm simply a sister in the Lord. And I use this show, I use this platform to share the different things that God has put on my heart. So if this is your first time listening to me, welcome. Thank you so much for your time, your attention. I know you have so many options out there. And I also want to say a big thank you to all of my returning subscribers. Thank you for your continued viewership and support. I really do appreciate it. So today's topic, I'm going to continue with my testimony series. I hope that my testimonies have been blessing you all. You know, these testimonies aren't, they're not easy to do. So they're really hard. So if you have not shared your testimony, I do pray that at some point you share them, you open up your mouth and you share what God has done in your life. So with all that being said, all that out the way, I'm going to talk about my father. I'm going to talk about my father was a drug addict, and I'm going to just start at the beginning, and I'm just going to, free flow. I don't have any notes, so I'm really going to rely on the Holy Spirit to kind of just bring things back to my remembrance, and we're just going to go from there. So I was born in Montgomery, Maryland. I am a Marylander. And I grew up in a single parent household. My mother, it was my mom, it was me, my sister, and my father was not a part of my life. My father, for as long as I've been alive, he has, he struggled with drugs and alcohol. And that really affected me. It really affected our family. We had a really, my childhood, even into my adulthood, it's been very challenging. It's been very hard. His addiction, it just was my whole life of him with this drug addiction. So I grew up with a single mom. She worked, she provided for us. She made sure we went to school. She made sure we, had a roof over our head. She made sure we had food to eat, clothes on our backs. So she played both the role of mother and father. And we did not particularly grow up in a Christian household. At one point, my mom tried to have us in church, but I don't think the experience for her was very good. I think the church that we went to at that time was a very religious type of church. And so I think that they looked down on her because, she was a single mom, and she was married to my father. So my mom and my mom and my dad were very much in love, but and they had plans. So I know I just jumped, so let me go back to the church. So my mom I don't think she had a good experience in the church. I think the church was religious. I think they looked down on her, and so we just left the church, and we never really went back. We never really got rooted or planted in any type of church. So I grew up just very worldly. I had access to things of the world, whether that was music, whether that was movies, culture, dress, whatever. We went to a lot of parties and stuff. We had a very it was a difficult childhood, but my mom did not shield us from like real life things. Like we pretty much grew up experiencing like real life. We were sheltered in some ways, but not in other ways. So as far as my mom and my dad, they were in love. They were married. They had big plans. They were planning on, they had a business together. They were, they had a lot of plans. They were building a house in Laurel, Maryland at one point. And my father was really smart. He was really, really smart. He was actually going to the University of Maryland for engineering. So my mom and my dad, when they met, and they were young. I mean, they were like in their teenage years. I think my mom was a little older than my dad, but they just had they had a lot of ambition. They had a lot going for themselves, and they got married, I believe, in the early 80s. Are you a child of God struggling with fear? Well, I have great news. In my ebook, Fear Not, I will give you 5 key strategies of how you can overcome fear and finally live by faith. Don't wait. I know this book is going to help you reclaim victory in your life. I can't wait to hear your testimony. So my sister was born first. I think she was 82. So, they were a young couple. They had a lot of plans. They had a lot of ambitions. They had a business. They were making a lot of money at this time. And the drug epidemic, for those of us, that understand, the crack epidemic, it really destroyed a lot of families. And my family was not exempt from it. My father, he got on those drugs, and he just could not, he just struggled with it his whole life, since I was born. So before I was even born, I was born in 85, he was already strung out on drugs. And by this time, he's being very violent towards my mom. He used to beat on my mother. He was just violent. The drugs just made him become a totally different person. And I would say, and this is how it was described to me, but before my father got on these drugs, he was a very calm, maybe, very gentle guy. He wasn't who he became when he got on those drugs. When he got on those drugs, it changed him. It just changed him. He was violent. He was stealing. My mom told me the story of they were planning on, they were building a house in Maryland, in Laurel, Maryland. And I think they needed, a couple $1,000s. And my mom was giving, my dad this money. I mean, it's her husband. Why would she hide money? And she also worked. I think she worked at the Department of Justice. So my mom, she worked. She had a job, and they had this business. And so she was giving him money, and he was using that money to get high. He was using that money to buy drugs and get high. And I think they lost the house, and they ended up, I think, living in this, apartment. And it just went downhill from there. He was stealing money. He wasn't using the money to, take care of things that needed to be taken care of. And then he was just violent. He was very violent. And, it just changed. He was beating on my mom. It became an unsafe environment for my mother to live in. And by the time I don't even think I walked. I think I just ran, because my mom had explained to me that one of the things that she was going to do before I could even walk was she was going to leave my father. And so I did not walk. I ran. I think I crawled, and then I ran. And she said that was her sign to leave my dad. So she left him. I think she had convinced him that she needed something from the store. She gave him some money. And when he left, she left. My mom was like, she knew he was not going to come back right away. And she knew he was going to get drugs. So she had packed up all of our stuff, and we moved to Columbia, Maryland. So Columbia, Maryland is pretty much where I was raised. I went to school there, and that's where we were. And so throughout my entire life, that has been the case with my father, always on drugs and always drunk. So in my teenage years, I had become very rebellious. I had started to become very angry. I used to fight a lot. I fought a lot. And I think it was me just acting out, because I knew my family structure wasn't like what I was seeing in other kids. I saw other kids with their mom, their dad, their parents. I didn't have that. It was just me, my sister, and my mom. And so because my mom had to play both roles of mother and father, she didn't always have time to, do school events or go to field trips or help me with my homework or anything like that, because my father had made this decision to get on drugs. And when he got on those drugs, it made all of our lives harder. It made my mom's life harder. She had to sacrifice a lot. My sister had to take on more responsibility in the house. She had to look after me. And she didn't even really get a chance, to some degree, to be a child. She was, washing clothes, washing dishes, making sure there was food, watching after me. And I was of course the youngest. So it just really, it changed our entire family dynamic. And I know people who have had or who have dealt with people on drugs, this is your reality. Your life changes. It's not what you thought it was going to be, because when a person is on drugs, it changes. It strips, it takes them from everything. And I saw that with my dad. And if he did come by, he was high, he was drunk. And let me just back up before my teenage years, because God is bringing some things to my remembrance. So one of the things about my father that I just absolutely could not stand was he would just lie a lot. And I don't think he did it intentionally, but he was always lying. He would always call my mom and say, "Oh, I have some money for the kids." And my mom, because she needed the money, she would go over there or go to where because my father didn't have a place of his own. He just, he lived with my grandmother, because he just, drugs strips people from everything. It takes everything. So he never had a house. He never had a car. And, my mom would come over and try to get money from him, but he wouldn't have any money, or he would just have like, $5, $6, or, I remember one time vividly, my mom had received a call from my father, and he had said he had money for her. And this was like 91, and I remember it vividly. And my mom had went to my grandmother's house, because that's where he was living. And she had went and said, "Hey, where's this money? The girls need, they need back to school clothes. They need this, that." And he didn't have anything. All he gave my mom was $14. He gave my mom $14. And I remember my mom being so angry. Like, she was angry. She got in the car, she was going nuts. And, there wasn't much you could do with $14. You can't take kids back to school shopping with $14. So my mom took us to watch the movie New Jack City. And to this day, I can't stand that movie, but that movie symbolized that day for me, because that was the movie we went to go see, because my dad only gave my mom $14. And she was just livid. So we went to the local theater there, and we watched New Jack City. And we saw it in the theaters, and I remember it vividly, because it was a big movie at the time, and then also this big fight between my mom and my dad. So, and my dad would always do stuff like that. He would always say, "Oh, I got money," or "I got this," and he just would never, or he would say things like, "I want to see, the kids, I want to see," and then he would never fulfill his promises. It was like a childhood, when it came to my father, of broken promises. And it hurt. It hurt all the time. And I remember I was a little bit closer to my father than my sister. And it just hurt, because as a child, you want to spend time with your parents. You want to spend time, particularly as a young girl. And I was very much a daddy's girl. I wanted to spend time with him. And the drugs, the alcohol, it eliminated any possibility of that. And I also remember, this is also very vivid, my sister and I used to walk home from school, because my mother worked. So we would get off, the school bus, and my sister was in charge of like making sure, we got home, we did our homework, she was in charge of all of that. And I remember one day, me and my sister were walking home from school, and we see this car. Just, and it was like a Cadillac. It was a big vehicle, and I remember it being old, and this car is just driving, and it's my dad. And if I've told this story in previous testimonies, I'm sorry, but this is all just coming back to my remembrance. But he pulls up in this car, just driving all erratic, and it was him. And I remember being happy to see him, but then I quickly realized that something is off with him. And so he tries to convince us to get in a car with him. Essentially, he was trying to kidnap us. he was just out of his mind, high or drunk. And I remember we got real scared, and he somehow got into our building, because the way our apartment was, it was like a door, and you had to have a key to get into the door, the first door, and then it was our actual unit. And somehow he got into the first door, and then I remember vividly me and my sister holding the door to try to keep my dad from coming into our apartment, because he was like belligerently drunk, belligerently like high. And it was just things like that. And those were things in our childhood that I experienced from him being an addict. And it was painful, and it was hard. And, eventually, we moved on. We had activities, we had summer things, we did things that normal children did. But when it came to my dad, that's how it was. We never knew how he was going to be. We always knew he's just going to be drunk. Dad's going to be, he's going to be drunk. He's going to be high. That kind of was the perception of him as a child. For me, is just nothing was really good attached to him. So in my teenage years, I just started to get really rebellious. I started to fight a lot. It got to the point where my mother was calling the police. I tried to run away from home several times. I had just gotten out of control. And this was like in middle school. I think like 12, 13, 14, I had really started to get very, very angry. And it was one particular day, and I remember it vividly. My mom had this townhouse. She had a townhouse, and in the living room, there was a fireplace. And this was one morning, and we had a string of arguments, fights, it was just constant. And it was so bad. I remember my mom asking me if I was on drugs, because I had a terrible temper. I just was out of control. I was out of control, and it just got to the point where my mom did not know what to do with me. She did not know what to do with me. My behavior was so bad. I mean, she had called the cops on me. Like, I remember like 3 times she had called the police on me. I had tried to run away. And this one particular morning, I want to say it was a Saturday, me and my mom get into a fight. I don't remember what the fight was about, but we got into a big fight. And I remember we were fighting. And let me just say this, as a young girl, I was extremely strong. I had like super strength. It was like demonic. I was very strong. And me and my mom were arguing in the living room. We were fighting so bad. And this anger came upon me. And I had grabbed one of the fire, I don't know if you call them like fire sticks or whatever. There was like a poker. You know how you get the wood and you put it in the fireplace. So I picked up that poker. And my intention was to swing at my mom. I was going to take that poker and I was going to swing it across my mother's face. And somehow when I picked up that poker, my mom she just grabbed me. She like wrapped her hands around me. I still have this poker in my hand, but it's like when she grabbed me, the strength that I had just evaporated. And I know it was God, because I had all intention to take that poker and swing her and basically take it and like punch force, basically swap my mother across the face with this poker. And she grabs me. I can feel the strength in my body release, and that poker dropped from my hand, and we got into this fight. We just fight, and it was just constant. I think it was in that moment that my mother realized, I don't know what to do with Monique. I don't know what to do with her. And up until this point, again, I'm getting in fights. The police are being called at the house. I'm getting into so much. I'm such a disruption to my mom. She doesn't know what to do. So my mother sends me to go live with my father. And at first, I'm happy. I'm like, good. I want to live with my father. I don't want to live here no more. So I go and live with my father. I lived with my father for about 3 months. So again, my father didn't have his own place. He did not have a vehicle. I originally my mother drops me off at my grandmother's house in Riverdale, Maryland. I never forget. So she drops me off in Maryland, and well, of course we're in Maryland, but she drops me off at my grandmother's house in Riverdale, and my grandmother's house was not the cleanest. It was nasty. I don't know how else to say it. It was dirty. It was not a clean environment. It was always a lot of people. Like my aunt was living there. Both of my aunts were living there. They were different. My cousins were living there. It was just a lot of in and out. My father was there. It was just always people in and out of that house. And so I go there to live with my dad. I would say within the first couple of hours, I felt, I don't want to say I felt in danger, but I just, that happiness of me living with my dad, it slowly evaporated, because throughout the time of me staying with my dad, I never saw any type of stability. He was always drinking. That was number one. He always would get alcohol. He always had alcohol in his possession. He wasn't able to really take care of me. And I'm like 13, so I'm a young girl. I don't know if I had my menstrual cycle yet, but I'm a young girl. I'm an adolescent, and he just could not take care of me. He was not equipped to take care of me at all. So I won't say I had to fend for myself, but he just did not he didn't have his own place. He didn't have a car. We walked everywhere. We walked everywhere. He never had a vehicle. He got his license suspended because of drinking. So whenever we went anywhere, we walked. And then he would get into arguments with my grandmother. Him and my grandmother stayed arguing. And I remember this one particular day, my grandmother was vacuuming. She was vacuuming her home like any other woman on a Saturday morning would do, or any day. And my father jolts upstairs and he rips the power cord out of the wall, and him and my grandmother are arguing. I'm asleep downstairs in the basement, and I woke up to them cussing and mother F and MF this and F this and F that. And basically my grandmother told my dad, like, look, you and your daughter, this is my house. You can leave. So we leave. And we go to, I guess, one of his roommates or something. I mean, we were always just going from house to house. It was just unstable. And I think we went to one of his roommates' house. We went to a place where his roommate was. And I remember we maybe caught the bus, or maybe he called somebody to come get him. But all his friends were into drugs. I don't think none of his friends or none of his associates were clean. And that was the first time. So we stay at this person's house. We stay at we stay in some room. And again, this is not the way my dad was living. He was living like an addict. People on drugs, they don't care about having certain things. They don't really care about nothing. They don't even have food. I don't remember my dad. I don't even remember any place where I stayed with my dad where it was him, where there was food in the refrigerator or water or not. I don't remember any of that. I just remember this particular roommate. He had ice cream or something, or he had some type of candy in the freezer, and I kept eating it because that was all there was to eat. He never had money. He was always broke. We were always walking, and we left that place. And then we would go back to my grandmother. And for him, I think that was his only stability, was my grandmother. And then they would get into another fight, or there would be another argument. And so we left again, and then we went to another place. I do recall him having an apartment in like DC. I think it was like Northwest or somewhere in Georgetown. I don't remember. I just remember it was hot. It was hot. This was like the summer of '98. It was hot, 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 and we walked everywhere. And my dad could walk real fast. He could just, and I'm like barely making it. Like, and he just kept looking back at me like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm hot, I'm tired. And we were at his apartment, and I remember when we went inside, first of all, it wasn't a safe neighborhood. I remember that. It was not a safe neighborhood. He had this African friend, and I remember his friend, I don't think he was into drugs. I think he was like a preacher or something. And I remember just looking at him because he had on this full-blown suit. And I'm like, it's hot as I don't know what out here. How do you have a suit on? But he was very nice. He was a very nice man. And he lived in the same building as my dad. But he had furniture, he had food. I remember like and this is like just the goodness of God. I think he saw my dad and he saw me with my dad, and he was like, I gotta help. Because I think anybody looking from the outside would see that this man is not capable of taking care of this child. Like he shouldn't even have this child. That's the kind of life my dad was living. And so when we were in his house or his apartment, it was really in like an apartment. There was no furniture. The only thing he had in there was a mattress. There was no food in the refrigerator. There was no juice. There was no soap. I couldn't even take a shower. I mean, again, I'm 13, maybe 14. I couldn't take a shower. There was a lot of days I don't think I bathed. I'm just being honest. I don't think I bathed. I don't think I was properly able to take care of myself. And I know he was not. I had my suitcase, whatever things I had that I packed from my mom's house. But we just literally we were always on the go. And we weren't there long. I do remember this African man praying for me. Like, I remember him saying, can I pray for you? I remember that vividly because I was in the car and this African man, and God is bringing some stuff to my remembrance. This African man had a car, and I think he was driving us to different places because my dad did not have a car. He was resourceful. He knew people who had stuff, but he himself never really had anything. So I remember I was waiting on my dad, and I was in his car, the African man's car, and he was saying, can I pray for you? And I remember accepting his prayer, and I just felt like that was God. Because I felt like God knew I was in danger. I'm just gonna be honest. I felt like living with him when he was just in his condition, I was in danger. So we left. I don't recall us going back to that apartment in DC. I don't know if he was able to probably wasn't able to keep it because there was literally nothing in there. So I remember just leaving that apartment, and then we met one of his other friends. It was a woman. They were not together. It wasn't like a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but they were, I met her. We would always it just was so, every day was different. I never knew what the day was going to bring. There was no structure. It was always just a life of the life of a drug addict is a very, they're just always chasing. There's no stability, there's no structure. So I meet one of his other friends. It's a lady. They're not together. They're not boyfriend and girlfriend. I remember because she had a car and she had a house in Fort Washington. So we meet her because at this time my grandmother, I think, had kicked him out again. So he goes and links up with this woman, and I just remember being in the car. This is summertime and it's hot, and we were just driving around, and I think they were just looking for drugs because I think they were both of them were into drugs. And we would drive and then we would keep stopping. We would drive and then we would stop. And I'm like, I don't understand why we keep stopping. and they would always stop at like a liquor store. And I just did not understand why they kept stopping. But eventually we actually went back to this lady's house. She had a nice house. She was renting her basement out. But her house was pretty nice. But she, I think she had like a master's degree. She was like a teacher, but she was on drugs. She was on drugs. And I remember one day she had this big balcony, and we were on the balcony, all three of us. It was just me, my dad, and this woman. And we were listening to some music, and we were listening to, I remember we were listening to Sade. We were listening to Sade's Greatest Hits album. And all of a sudden, they both started to get up. They both got up and they both left. And I'm on the balcony by myself, just listening to the music. And when I go back inside, I saw like a door shut, and I smelled smoke. I didn't know exactly what I was smelling, but it was basically drugs. They were in there getting high. And that was just how it was. He was always drinking, and he was always getting high. So we left, we left that woman's house. And I remember we went to, we were always going somewhere. And I remember we went to Philadelphia. We went to see my uncle, who was not into drugs. He's actually, I believe he pastors today, among other things, but he did not do drugs. He did not engage in drugs. So we went to Philadelphia to see my uncle, and he had like this great apartment. I thought his apartment was so cool. And we went to Philly. We got on the train station. That was one of the more positive things I remember about my dad. He loved the train. And so, and the trains in Philly, they run, I think, like all night. So I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And he was kind of better there. We weren't there long, but I remember we were at the Philadelphia train station. And I remember him saying to me, I'll be right back. And when he said that, I really did not think he was going to come back. Because, you know, drug addicts, they have to be where their supply is. So I'm thinking he's out looking for drugs. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, during our time in Philly, he was finding drugs somewhere. Yeah, I do. Gosh, it's so many things you put out your mind when you're a child. But I remember we went to somebody's house. It wasn't my uncle. But we went to someone's house, or my dad took me to somebody's house. And I think he was in there getting high, because I remember him telling me like, oh, go outside or go on the balcony. And he was getting high. Now, he never got high in front of me. He never did drugs in front of me. He would drink in front of me, but he never did any drugs in front of me. I don't think he could have handled it, because he knew he knew. And people who are in that life, they know. And I think me being there with him, it was probably too much for him. It was probably looking back, just too much for him. But he was probably getting high there. We left Philadelphia. We came back to Maryland. We went back with the woman who we were staying with in Fort Washington. And I didn't particularly care for that woman, but you know, what can you do? You're a kid. And he just, that was just that whole time. And I just remember I was ready to leave. Like I was, because I never saw him sober. I never saw him in his right state of mind. It would be very up and down. Like sometimes he would be real funny, but he was always high or drunk. He was just, and that's not good for a child to see. Children need structure and stability, and I never saw that with him. And we would just bounce around. So we left, you know, the lady's house in Fort Washington. We went back to my grandmother's house. I remember one day there was nobody in the house, like shockingly. And I remember just like looking for something to eat in the refrigerator. And there was like roaches, you know, coming out of the freezer, coming out of the refrigerator. There were roaches in the dryer. I never wanted to bathe regularly, because the bathroom, there was only one bathroom, and it was really nasty. And it I was ready to leave. Like, I was ready to go back with my mother because I knew my father could not take care of me. I knew he was not, after spending the time that I spent with him. And it was like 3 months. Seeing him, be here, be there, just his life was so chaotic and dysfunctional. I knew he couldn't take care of me. So I remember my mom, I was at my grandmother's house. I was in her bedroom and something told me to look outside the window, and it was my mom. And I bolted down the steps. Like, I bolted down the steps and I greet my mom. I'm like, Mom, are you coming to get me? And, she was like, no, I just want to check on you, make sure you're okay. And I was like, no, like, I want to go home. And I think she was just trying to make sure, I was better, but I wanted to leave so bad because he just could not take care of me. He could not be a parent. He was just those drugs had just sent him in a totally different direction. So I'm just trying to think if there was anything else. So basically my mom did leave, and I don't know how much longer I stayed. Maybe I stayed another month there, but it was just more the same. Like, I wasn't eating really good. I was always eating we were always eating fast food. It was, maybe some McDonald's, or we would go to like a corner. He would go to like a corner store, and he definitely got his alcohol. I don't even remember my father like really eating like that. I just always saw him drinking. He drank, he smoked, but that was like his life. That was his lifestyle. It was just erratic. So I want to say maybe I stayed another month or so with him. And then my mom eventually came and got me. And the day she got me, I was just so happy. I was so happy. My mom was like, you took the longest shower, because I wasn't really bathing regularly. I didn't feel comfortable using. I couldn't take a shower at my dad's apartment. He didn't have any soap. He didn't even have soap. He didn't have a washcloth. He didn't have nothing. I did bathe at this woman's house. Her house was cleaner, but it was just erratic. It just taught me that drugs it just takes everything from you. It just takes everything from you. Like, he had nothing. He never had money. He never had nothing, because the drugs just, took his life. And once I left my dad's, once I got back to my mom, my mom didn't have any problems with me. Not like major problems, because I did not want to live with my dad anymore. Like, I never wanted that to happen again. Like, my mom didn't have any issues with me, because I just knew he could not take care of me, and his lifestyle was not conducive for a young girl. His lifestyle just wasn't conducive. So that put me on the right path. Once I left my father's, his hands, it was just crazy. It was a lot of dysfunction. It was a lot of just dysfunction. I saw what the life of a drug addict looks like. It's just constant chasing for drugs, constant, he would be in the streets, he would be here, he would be there. I never saw him go to like a job every day. He had some type of job, but then I don't remember him being at that job. Like, he did have a job. I do remember going there, but then like, I don't remember him going there like every day. Like, it was just sporadic. But yeah, that was the life that he was living. And so I go back home to my mom. I'm focused. I am a new person when I left my father. I'm focused on school. Again, my mom didn't really she didn't really have any major issues with me, because I did not want to live with my dad again. So after coming back, living with my mom, things were, life was life. And I went to school, went to high school, graduated from high school, went to college, went on to do different things, became a woman, started living on my own. And he did, my father did, he did remarry. There was a brief time where he remarried and he had gotten off of drugs. So I want to say around 2012, because one of the things I said to my father when he was really on those drugs was, I can't have a relationship with you if you're on drugs. And so I didn't have a relationship with my dad for a long time. Like, we had a brief relationship in like 2008, but then he had said something to me about me wanting money from him because I think I had lost my job or something, and he had made a comment that, oh, you're trying to get money out of me. And I'm like, I've never asked you for a dime. So I just kind of cut him off. Honestly, I cut him off. And in 2012, after Whitney Houston had passed, I had felt kind of like I need to, like, you know, because, you know, Whitney had a drug addiction and she died obviously from her drug addiction. And I felt like I needed to re-engage with my dad. And so we re-engaged in 2012 and we reconnected. Things were good for a while. Wasn't perfect by any means. He had even reconnected with my sister. And that didn't, you know, that worked for a little bit and then it didn't. And, you know, he did remarry. He got his life together a little bit. And then I want to say maybe 2017, 2018, he relapsed. He relapsed in drugs. He, you know, his second wife left. He had got back into those drugs again. And then he started, you know, hitting on her. He started beating on her, and that was not safe for her. And he went back to, you know, he went back into that life. So he did. There was a brief time where he was clean. He was on the right track, and then, you know, he got back into that drug. He got back into the drug lifestyle, and that ultimately contributed to, I think, his death. So he died last year, and, you know, whatever. And God is so good because God prepared me for that. He really prepared me for saying basically goodbye to my dad. And he just kept like, you need to see your dad. You need to see your dad. Because I had known at this time, like 2022, 2023, like after my dad had gotten divorced for the second time, we all knew he was living at my grandmother's house. At this point, this house is like a drug house. It had been, and I remember having a conversation with my dad because in 2018, I was so angry with him. I was really devastated that he had relapsed and gotten back on those drugs. And I remember the conversation I had with him, and I was yelling at him. I was angry with him. And looking back, I mean, I can't change it, but I mean, I wouldn't have done that now. But it just taught me grace, right? You have to have grace with people because we really don't know people's levels of strength. So 2018, you know, he's divorced. He's back at my grandmother's house. My grandmother passed in, I think, 2016. So I think that's what also contributed to him being back on drugs. And it just was, you know, up until my dad ended up going into the hospital in 2022 or maybe 2023. That's just what it was. He was at that house. He was getting back into the drug lifestyle. He had gotten beat up really bad. He was not in a good condition. My uncle actually found him in the bathroom of my grandmother's house, like basically, I guess, passed out. So they took him to the hospital, and he spent his last 6 months, I think, in the hospital. And he, you know, I went to go see him. The last time I saw my father alive was November of 2022. And when I walked into that hospital and I saw the condition of his body, any type of animosity, any type of hatred, anything that I felt towards him, it was like I automatically forgave him because I knew he wasn't coming out of that hospital alive. I knew that. He was not in a good condition. He was blind. He really could not talk. He really couldn't talk. He was just in bad shape. And so everything I needed to say to him, I said. I told him I forgave him. I did love my father. I didn't agree with his lifestyle. It brought a lot of pain to the people he loved. But we can't just judge. Like, I think the lesson I got from my dad is compassion, love, definitely forgiveness, because we all need it and we all need grace. So, he died last year. I buried him. Well, we buried him, and that was it. And, I learned a lot from that time. But so, yeah, that's the testimony I wanted to share. This wasn't easy. When you lose a parent or anybody, any loved one to drugs and alcohol, addiction is painful, because the whole family suffers. Everybody suffers. There is no winner. Addiction is definitely of the devil. It just steals so much life. There's no life in addiction. So that's it. That's my testimony. I loved my father. I thank God. In a lot of ways, I'm thankful that he's no longer here struggling and suffering. I pray that he's in heaven. I don't know. I do know he was, in prayer. He was praying before he, transitions. And I'm praying to God that he did make it to heaven, but I don't know. Only God knows that. And I'm praying that he did, because I know if he knew where the drugs were going to take him, I don't think he would have got involved, because he lost his, and he loved my mother. He was head over heels in love with my mom. My mom loved him. They were in love. They were building a family. They were building a business, so I don't think he would have made the same decision if he knew where the drugs were going to take him, where it was going to lead him. And so all I have is love for him. I don't have any hatred. It's been a journey. It was very hard last year, just dealing with so many emotions. I definitely did. I realize now that there was a lot that I did not get as a child, but thank God that I have a heavenly Father who, he doesn't abandon us. So for those of you who are watching this, like, yeah, that was me, and you have hatred, or you have bitterness, or you have anger, or whatever you feel, let it go. Let it go, because we just don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And I think people make certain decisions not knowing sometimes the full impact of what that decision is going to do for their family, their children. So that's all I have. I mean, this again wasn't easy to do. I thank God that he led me to do this video, because I certainly did not have this in my mind. But I think leaving this, the call to action for those of you who are hearing this, is number one, if this is a testimony that you relate to, if somebody in your family or your friends that have struggled with addiction, just keep them in prayer. It's not easy, but keep them in prayer. Don't stop praying for them. Don't stop praying for their deliverance. And also have compassion and grace and mercy, because that's what they need, and that's what we need. Like, sometimes we forget that what we're experiencing is what God has already experienced. He's already experienced this level of pain. So yeah, just keep them in prayer. Pray for them. Have mercy on them. Be graceful. Be compassionate. Because we just don't know what people are dealing with. And when you're dealing with addiction, it is hard. It is so hard, because you want that person to get off those drugs. You want to see that person. You want to have a relationship, but they have to want that as well. So that's all I have, guys. I hope this blessed someone. I hope this resonated with someone. But again, if you have a testimony, just share it, because you never know how your testimony may change someone's life. But that's all I have, y'all. I want to hear your comments. Give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. Are you dealing with something similar? Have you dealt with something similar? But, you know, to God be the glory. He has done so much for me. And I'm thankful for where I am with him, because we all need him. We all need his grace for, you know, situations like this. And my life could have went totally different, you know, but it's his grace that saved me. So guys, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. And until next time, I love you. Be blessed. Stay safe. Bye-bye.